This is my latest home-built PC that is replacing my computer that I had put together back in 2018. This extremely powerful PC is capable of handling 4K, 6K, and 8K files from some of the higher-end cinema cameras that we know, such as the Sony FX6, the Red Komodo, the Canon C-Series, and the Blackmagic Pixis, just to name a few. I'm going to be covering everything that I put into this build, as well as other parts to consider if you're looking to build something similar to what I have based on certain specs you want, or just to help suit your overall budget. Like I just mentioned, this new PC is replacing my old computer that I put together back in 2018. I actually got some of the specs off of one of Matt Johnson's PC build videos, and since then I've made several upgrades to it that fit my needs. And while it still works great, I just wasn't going to be able to do much else with it unless I replaced the entire motherboard. So basically, I just maxed out everything that I could upgrade over the past 6 years, from the CPU to the RAM. But not only that, this computer was just meant mainly for 4K editing, and now I'm working with 4K, 6K, and 8K files. So I knew it was time to just get a more powerful computer to keep up with everything that I was just going to be editing. I'll go over more of my reasoning behind this build toward the end of the video, because I'm sure you're ready to hear what all I have packed into this computer. So let's start with the motherboard. The motherboard I chose was the MSI Z790 Gaming Plus Wi-Fi. There are a few things I like about this board. The first is, for the price, I can switch over to DDR5 memory, which is going to improve the computer's performance overall. My old PC ran on DDR4, which is going to be slower than DDR5, but PC parts for DDR5 have just gone down in price over the years, so I was ready to make the switch. This motherboard also has 3 individual M.2 SSD slots. I really like this because for my build, I opted to install 2 SSDs, one for my Windows 11 and main programs, while the other I was just going to have all of my editing software on it, from Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, as well as Photoshop, Lightroom, just the rest of Adobe Suite. This allows for me to manage storage on my computer more efficiently, because on my first PC build, I only had 1 SSD, and I noticed very quickly just how easy it was to max out that storage. So by keeping all things Adobe on a separate drive, if I upgrade that SSD later, I'm not going to need to reinstall Windows, because Windows is on its own SSD. So swapping out M.2s is just easy. For the M.2 SSDs, I went with the Samsung 2TB 990 Pro, which I think is going to be plenty of memory for this build. They do offer this in 4TB as well, but I probably wouldn't use an SSD of that size unless the motherboard only has space for 1 SSD overall. For the price of this motherboard, you also get built-in Wi-Fi, and it's going to come with this magnetic antenna that you can place wherever suits you best. I just like to keep mine in the back corner of the PC just so it's tucked away. This motherboard is capable of supporting Intel CPUs from 12th, 13th, and 14th gen, and the CPU I opted for was the Intel i9 14900K. I was originally looking at the 12900K, which has 16 cores and 24 threads of performance. And for the price, it's gonna get the job done no problem if you're on a budget. However, in order to get faster video edits and rendering speeds out of this PC, I wanted to go with the 14900K because it has 24 cores and 32 threads of performance, way more than the 12900K. Now, both CPUs that I mentioned are going to handle 4K, 6K, 8K video without a problem. They're both very powerful CPUs. I just opted for faster performance on my video edits, since I do handle large 6K and 8K raw files now. I do understand that some people online have brought up the issue with this CPU, particularly how hot it can get, and some have mentioned instability issues as well with certain programs and games. But as I did my research and consulted with a couple friends of mine who personally own the 14900K, they haven't had issues with the CPU, but they did recommend going with a liquid-based CPU cooler, so that's what I opted to do. For the cooler, I'm using the Kraken 280 AIO. Now, I've never used one of these coolers before. I've always used a basic electric air cooler, but the options I saw for air cooling really were not going to keep up with my CPU, especially if it's going to get hot all the time. On top of that, the air cooling options look very blocky and just weren't going to allow enough clearance for the RAM sticks that I chose. So the Kraken series liquid coolers worked great. Not only that, but this one in particular provides me live temperature readings for both the CPU and the graphics card. As of right now, when I do basic editing in Premiere Pro or export a massive video file, the CPU temp likes to stay around 40 degrees or less, and I can export a 30-minute long video clip in 6 to 8 minutes no problem. When I have Premiere Pro do something such as apply warp stabilizer to a fairly long video clip, this is when I start to see the temps go up, because it's just starting to load the CPU down more than usual. And even for this amount of work on the CPU, I was still happy with the result, since the temps went right back down as soon as it was done. Now on to the most expensive part of this entire build, and that would be the graphics card. Since I handle 6K and 8K RAW files, I did not want to go cheap on this part, because the graphics card is responsible for generating the quality of image that you look at on your monitor. So the more powerful the graphics card, the faster and better the image can be displayed. The graphics card I chose was the AMD Radeon RX 7900 XTX with 24 gigabytes of RAM. This is a massive GPU, and if you're looking to use this graphics card, be ready to buy a bigger case, because that's what ended up happening to me. More on that later. At the time of making this video, I paid a little over $800 for this GPU alone, but if you want something similar, they do offer the same graphics card with only 20 gigabytes of RAM for roughly $600. The more RAM that you can buy for your graphics card, the better your image resolution. And I will say, for budget purposes, a GPU that can have between 12 or 16 gigabytes of RAM is going to serve you well for video editing, but I mainly went with the 24 gigabytes for future proofing, as well as just to ensure that it was going to work easily with 8K RAW files. For my sticks of RAM, this PC has 128 gigs of Corsair Vengeance DDR5 RAM in the RGB version. My only reason for RGB, surprisingly enough, is more just for the sake of knowing when my PC is actually on and running, rather than for an appearance factor. So there's an option to save some money on RAM by going with the non-RGB version, and I think you'll save around $100 or more depending on what you go with. While Premiere Pro and all these other editing platforms only require at least 16 gigs of RAM, I found that 32 gigs is the sweet spot if you're running only one of these programs at a time in 4K resolution. Anything higher than that, I would suggest 64 gigs, especially if your videos are a longer format and a higher video resolution. For me, I've always maxed out my RAM because I'll have instances where I'm in an edit working between Premiere Pro, After Effects, and Adobe Audition, and I'll have them all opened up at the same time, since you can automatically transfer parts of your edits back and forth on these platforms to make necessary adjustments for your audio or visual edits. And doing that requires more RAM from personal experience, unless you really do want your PC to freeze up all the time. The more programs you're going to be running at the same time is going to require more RAM overall if you want your PC to run smoothly. Again, this is just how I've edited in the past, because I'm all about getting projects done as quickly as I can without having to open, close, reopen programs again and again, so I can just make those small little adjustments to whatever it is I need to work on. So far, everything I've listed at this point is going to require a lot of power. In fact, the total amount of wattage for this build is closer to 875 watts. So with that, I opted for the Corsair RM1000E power supply. This is a compact version of the Corsair RM1000i, which is going to give you way more ports to plug in additional items, but for now, the power supply that I have is just going to manage everything I need, no problem. Now, if I find myself making any other mods to this PC down the road, I may have to upgrade the power supply, but I don't expect to do anything like that for quite a while. So this power supply is perfect for both budget and overall performance. Moving on to built-in storage, this PC currently has a total of 24 terabytes of internal memory, not including the 4 terabytes from those M.2s we talked about earlier. I have a Seagate 8 terabyte internal hard drive that I took out of my previous build and then added another 16 terabyte hard drive on top of that. This is just going to allow me to have plenty of storage space for all the raw files that I need to keep for certain periods of time, as well as just store completed projects that are either in 4K, 6K, or 8K resolution. And with the way file sizes are getting larger every year, I just wanted to invest some of my money into making sure this PC just had enough storage to last me quite a while, assuming everything I work on is not always in 8K resolution. It might be overkill for some of you, but then again, it might not. I mainly just wanted to future-proof the memory aspect of this build because of the file types I work with every so often. I can also add more internals memory to this build later if I want to, but what I may end up doing is, if I have to, I'll swap the 8 terabyte hard drive out with another 16 or 20 terabytes if I can afford it, and take that old 8 terabytes and just put it in storage with any files that I just want to keep off of the new drives. A very important aspect to my build was making sure that the PC was just getting the proper amount of airflow and cooling all around, so I picked up 3 more system fans from Corsair. These are the RGB LL120 fans, and again, my main purpose for RGB is just to know when the PC is on, so I like to keep these fans on all white. It just looks nice to me. And the main issue that I did find in my build was the motherboard didn't have enough ports for me to plug in every fan that I wanted. So I picked up the Corsair iQ Commander Core XT, which is going to allow me to hook up additional fans while only needing to plug it into 1 port on the motherboard. Installation was also really easy since it has a built-in magnet for you to just install it anywhere you want in the case that's made of metal. Now, we can't make this PC run without setting it up in a big enough case, and like I mentioned earlier, I had a case picked out which was the Corsair 4000D Airflow. In this case in particular, had this beautiful wood panel on the front that just complemented that all black frame. Sadly, the case was not going to be big enough to lay out everything the way that I wanted. In fact, if I wanted to make the case work, which you can, I was going to have to mount the radiator fans from the Kraken 280 cooler on the front of the case instead of the top like I wanted, because there was just no wiggle room for the RAM sticks, and the GPU was so massive it stretched the entire length of the case, so that wasn't going to work for me either. What I ended up going with was the NZXT H9 Flow. Now, I wasn't too attracted to this case at first because I'm just not used to this style case. I was used to a sleek looking case, but the tank style just grew on me a little bit more as I was putting the build together. While this case does not have any wood panels like the 4000D did, I just decided to take a piece of basswood, cut it to size, stain it, and then attach it to the front of the case with some small magnets that you can pick up at your local Hobby Lobby for $2. What's great overall about this case is it is providing airflow to all the components from top to bottom. There's a total of 12 fans running in this case, 2 on the top for the CPU cooler, which are helping push out the warm air, 3 on the bottom and front for intake, and 3 that are built into the GPU. 1 is on the back as well that helps push out additional excess air that is inside the case. Ultimately, I've installed a ton of fans into this case just to make sure all of these components are getting cooled efficiently, especially if I'm running Premiere Pro for long periods of time editing 8K videos. And since I have intake fans on the base of the case, I also purchased this portable PC base that raises the case off the ground a little bit more, so that way more air can enter the bottom, because my office is carpeted and I didn't want to interrupt the airflow from the base if the carpet was getting in the way at all. Price-wise for this entire build, my total came out to a little over $2,500, which I know can be way more than what many of you are going to be willing to spend, but since I don't intend to upgrade PCs again for another 5+ years like I did with my first PC, the investment can make sense for the long haul, but I'm also projecting to try and keep this computer for at least 7 or 8 years before considering building a brand new computer again, because by that point, the advancements in cameras and video editing should be way better, and I just see it continuing to develop each year, so more powerful computers are going to be needed, which is why this PC is so future-proofed. I won't be able to upgrade the CPU any further on this build since I went with the 14th gen CPU, but the RAM, the graphics card, and the memory, I can definitely swap those out and modify it down the road if I feel like I need to. Now, you can get a similar PC build for less money if you choose to go with a CPU that has less cores and threads, a graphics card that is not as big as 24 gigs. Again, you can go between 12 and 16 gigs of RAM, and that'll work great. And compared to the 128 gigs of RAM that I've already installed, you can cut that back to 32 or 64 gigs. And if you don't have any parts with RGB built in it, that's going to lower the price too. You'll also save money as well if you don't need 24 terabytes of internal memory, because I really don't expect you to need that much. I've seen people running editing PCs with only 2 to 4 terabytes of internal storage, so ultimately you can cut this $2,500 build back down to $1,500 or $1,800 depending on the parts you end up going with, and I would just keep in mind that if you want to future-proof your PC like I did, you're going to end up spending more money. But if you're looking for something that can just work, and you know you're not going to be going over anything like 4K resolution, then that lower price point is going to be great for your PC build, and it's just going to last you a long time like my first one did. If you want links to all the parts in my PC build as well as my recommendations for the budget-friendly parts, I'll have all of that listed in the description below, on my kits page. I hope this video has been enjoyable for you. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like this video as well as subscribe. I hope to have more content out for you like this very soon. Thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.